This video is to help you facilitate lessons 50 through 51 of the 5th grade Excel curriculum. Lesson 50 begins with rounding whole numbers. In this lesson, it starts with asking students to round to the nearest hundred. So it's going to be important that students are able to identify the two hundreds that a number falls between. And so we're starting with 5,284. Students need to be able to name that 5,200 is smaller than the number and 5,300 is larger than the number. And then they need to be able to identify as they plot what 5,284 is closest to, and that will help them round to 5,300. As they jump into the next example, which is really a connection to the first one, we're using the same number, 5,284. And now students are going to have to be really aware of their place value. So they have to be able to identify the number that's in the hundreds place and circle it. They're looking at the number that's to the right. If it's greater than 5, they round up. Less than 5, they round down. So because they're looking at the 2, and 8 is next to it. 8 is larger than 5, so this number becomes 5,300. They are going to use that same process as they jump into the try it. They're using the same strategy as they round 67,304 to the nearest 1,000. What's important is that students are able to identify the number in the thousands place and then circle it. So as students jump into the practice problems, what you want to pay attention to is whatever number students are being asked to round to, that they are identifying the digit in that place value. So in the first practice problem, they're rounding 7,631 to the nearest 100, so they need to circle the number that's in the hundreds place. That's what you're looking for as you're lapping and supporting students with completing the practice problems. And you will see each problem is just more practice with rounding. And so make sure they're identifying the number and the appropriate place value. As you jump into lesson 51, students are going to be introduced to decimals. So first we want to understand how to represent a decimal. So they are going to start out by modeling 28 hundredths using this grid. So I've shaded in, you can ask kids to shade it in 28 hundredths. There's two ways. I can shade in 2 rows of 10 and 1 row of eighth, or I can shade in 2 columns of 10 and 1 row of eighths. Both are the same. When I look at my shading, I see that I have shaded 2 tenths or 20 hundredths, and I have shaded 8 hundredths. So when I write this as a decimal, I can use my place value chart. I don't have any ones. I have 2 tenths, that's why there's a 2 in the tenths column, and I have 8 hundredths, that's why there's an 8 in the hundredths column. As we jump into the next problem, this is a connection to the first example. I'm using that same fraction, but now I'm going to write it as a decimal without a model, without the grid. So first, students need to be able to read this appropriately, and you want to model it for them. I see 100 in the denominator, so I know I'm looking at hundredths, and there's a 28 in the numerator. So this fraction, the way I say it out loud, is 28 hundredths. The way I say it is the way I write it. So it's going to be important that students have that place value chart and that they write exactly what they say. 28 hundredths. So that place value that I'm saying, my last digit that I am naming goes in that place value. That 8 goes in the hundredths, and I can actually work backwards, 28 hundredths. I am going to use that same strategy as they jump into the try it. In the next example, I am writing 4/10 as a decimal using a number line. So I first want to show 4/10 on that number line so I can divide the number line into 10 equal parts and then plot 4/10. And then I can also, you can help students recognize that a number that's divided into equal parts can also be represented as a decimal. So if I have 10 parts, this represents tenths. That's 1/10. I'm going to write 1/10 as a decimal, 2/10, 3/10, etc. So now it will be easy for me to identify that when I see 4/10 as a fraction, I can now see what that looks like as a decimal. I'm going to use the same strategy as they jump into example B. Using a number line, they're going to show 85 hundredths on that number line. Because we are using hundredths, I want to make sure that I am labeling my number line as hundredths, 10 hundredths, 20 hundredths, 30, etc. And then I will be able to identify what 85 hundredths looks like as a decimal. Students can also check their answer using the place value chart. Some of your students will want to jump right to the place value chart. That will be a great way to check their answers, but it's important for students to understand the relationship between fractions and decimals. That is the purpose of examples like example B. So that when they get into the practice problem, students are pushed to represent decimals in fractions, in numbers, by shading or using the place value charts. You just want to push kids to make sure they're able to identify decimals in any of those ways. Lesson 52 builds on Lesson 51, where students are now using their place value to read and write decimals. For this lesson, it is going to be really helpful that students always have place value charts with them so that they can write the numbers on the chart. So if we look, we have a number 45.38, 45 and 38 hundredths. We want to be able to identify what each digit stands for. So students on their place value chart are going to write this number in the chart to be able to identify the digits, just like they did in step 2. So when they get to the try it, again, students are going to have that place value chart. They're going to write the digits in the chart, and then they're going to be able to identify the place value for each digit. This continues as they jump into example B. They are following the exact same strategies to be able to write numbers, write the names for each number. So first we are going to write the number in the place value chart. And then they're going to use what they wrote to write the name in words of that number. So we see 28. We're going to write 28 first. And now we see 3/10, 400s, and 5,000s. So this is 345, and we're ending with the thousands place. So that's how I know that I have 345 thousandths. They're going to use that same strategy as they jump into the try it. Here you want to make sure that students have a place value chart and they are using that chart exactly the way that we see it in step 2. So we see 96. That's 9 tens, 6 ones. I'm going to put in my decimal place. I have 7 tenths and 1/100th. We don't have any thousandths here, so you actually don't need to draw the thousandths. That's how I'm able to identify that I have 96. My decimal point is always and 71/100ths. This place value chart is going to be critical as students become more comfortable with this strategy. In the final example, students are now writing a decimal in expanded form. So we're looking at 28 and 345 thousandths. We're going to, first step, always write the number in the place value chart first. And then we're going to use that place value to write an expression. So we have 2 tens. That's why we write 2 times 10. 8 ones. 3 tenths. So here you want to remember this is a tenth. I can write this as a fraction. So we're building on that last lesson. 4 hundredths. That's 100th. 1/100th. 1/100. And 5 thousandths. And to write these all together, we separate them with a plus sign. So that's how we get the expanded form of that number. So as students jump into the practice, they are given place value charts, which is going to be really helpful. And as they jump into questions 6, 7, and 8, push students to draw their own place value chart, particularly if you're having to provide any strategic guidance on questions 1 through 5. This place value chart is going to ensure that they're able to identify the correct place value for each number. Thus, they'll end up being successful in writing numbers in expanded form.